The Old Testament reading is Exodus chapter 33, beginning with the 12th verse. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, 'Bring up this people,' but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Now, therefore, I pray, if I have found favor in your sight, show me now your ways, that I may know you and find favor in your sight." And the Lord said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Moses said, "I pray, Lord, show me your glory." And he said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. But," he said, "you cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live." And the Lord said, "Behold, there is a place by me where you shall stand upon the rock. And while my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
I've been thinking all this week about Moses being up on that mountain alone with God. There are probably two kinds of people in the world, and maybe you know some of these. There are people who are very familiar with God. They seem to be on intimate terms with God. They understand God very well. It just seems to come easy to them. And then there are other people, they're confused by God. They are baffled by God. They just don't get it. It's just beyond them. How shall I say it? Moses is both. Moses was on extremely intimate terms with God, and yet at the same time, he is always baffled by God. He knows God better than anyone else, but he's saying, "God, there's so much I don't. Will you show me your glory? Will you show me this? I only know just a portion." It's a lovely appeal. If it's hard to get this, we might compare it to our knowledge of other people. If you think about this, and we don't think about it this way very often, to love another person is to try to get a glimpse of the glory that that other person is. We forget that. I've been married to Lisa for 28 and a half years, and she is amazing. She is a wonder. She is a complex person that I know pretty darn well after all this time. However, last week we were on vacation, and this was amazing. 2 times. Not once, 2 times. She made me laugh out loud with a brand of humor I have never heard come out of her mouth before. Like, who are you? There's this new thing in there. What's going to happen next year? No telling. The other person is this wonder that you never fully understand. It's why we never feel fully understood by other people. There's just too much to you. There's too much wonder in you, and we spend our days in love trying to comprehend the glory that is another person. How much more so with God? Because it's God. You could spend your lifetime learning about God, you would barely brush the hem of God's garment. Moses says, "Show me your glory." The fact that we don't know all we need or want to know about God, or if we're baffled or we're confused, doesn't mean that we can't have a relationship. It doesn't mean that we can't love. I love A River Runs Through It. The movie version of this especially is fascinating. Tom Skerritt plays this pastor, Reverend McLean, and he's lamenting the death of his son, Paul, who's played by young Brad Pitt. And in one of his last sermons, Reverend McLean says this: "It is those we live with and should know who elude us, but we can still love them. We can love completely without complete understanding. We don't and won't have complete understanding of God, but we can love." I love the way this plays out in the Old Testament. It's fascinating. God always says, "My glory is too great. It would blind you. It would overwhelm you. It would annihilate you." I always feel like I'm watching The Wizard of Oz. now I just have to narrate this as an aside. Some of you are too young to get this, but those of you who nod, you'll be dating yourself as being my age or older. When I was a little boy, The Wizard of Oz came on once a year on television. And we would book in the date, and my mother would make pancakes for us, and we'd raise the rabbit ears on the TV and wrap a little tinfoil around it to try to get the best possible reception. And we would watch the movie. And for years, I had no idea that in the middle of the movie, it became color. It's like, we didn't have color TV. Like, who knew? You young people just missed this grand adventure, let me tell you. So the climax of The Wizard of Oz comes when Dorothy and her companions finally get an audience with the wizard. And of course, you know how this goes. They come in, and it's the great and glorious wizard thundering. There's fire, and there's smoke, and they're trembling and cowering in fear. But then Toto comes and pulls the curtain back, and it's just a man back there. It's just a guy. This is really what happens in the New Testament, and let me say, God's glory was just overwhelming. It was too much. It was mind-boggling. But when Jesus came, a curtain was pulled back, and it was just a man. God said, I want them to be able to look at my glory. So he became this man, Jesus. And when we look at the face of Jesus, we see the face and the heart of God. What we see in that face of Jesus, it's all compassion. It's all mercy. Jesus included everybody. Jesus took the people who'd been ground to a pulp that nobody cared about, and he honored them and he lifted them up. Jesus was all about justice and goodness and wisdom, and he was patient and forgiving. He healed people who just were in a hopeless state. He fed people that were desperately hungry. He even got involved with death itself. I mean, he could have just floated up to heaven, I guess, but he let himself be wounded because he wanted to be one with us in our sufferings. And that's the glory of God. Would have blinded Moses entirely. Moses had to avert his gaze, but we can look directly into the face of Jesus and see the glory of God. But back to the Old Testament, when Moses is on the mountain, God says, I want you to see some of my glory, but it'd be too much for you, it would overwhelm you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide you in the cleft of this rock, and I'll shield you with my hand, and I'll walk past, and once I'm past, you can see my backside. Like, what is that? Right? I thought about preaching the rest of the sermon like this. It's not the backside to you guys, is it? No. You see God's back, I don't know what that is, God's backside, and all I can make of it is that if God's going by and you see God's backside, then what you see is, in effect, God's wake. What you see is where God has been. You see what God has done. God wants us to know God's glory because of what God has done. And you do well to spend the rest of the day and any day for the rest of your life just contemplating the good things that God has done. Can't think of a better way to spend. I was on I've told some of you this before. I went on a clergy retreat a number of years ago, and I would not have known if I had known what the protocol was for this retreat. I thought we would have activities and games and speakers. No, we got there and they said 3 days of silence. Now you have to understand, clergy people, we don't know how to do anything except talk. And we couldn't talk for 3 days. It was gruesome. The first day, it was just excruciating. The second day, I was kind of jiving in with this thing. By the third day, it was so liberating. You don't have to talk. It's just lovely. Every day, they had an assignment for you for how to spend the time when you were being silent. So the first day at lunch, they hand you a piece of paper and they say, here's your assignment for the afternoon. It just had one sentence on it. It said, remember what God has done in your life. And I thought, well, it's going to take me 10 minutes. What am I going to do the rest of the afternoon? But I had the whole afternoon, so I kept trying to remember what God had done in my life. I really needed more time. I kept remembering things, so many things, so many signs of goodness of God that I'd forgotten about, that I hadn't noticed before, that I hadn't chalked up to God. I think so many things, so many acts of kindness and mercy, some teacher that was patient with you, some coach that encouraged you, some employer who gave you a second chance. I had a girlfriend that went out with me. I had friends who would play with me. I had an aunt who treated me better than you would treat your own child. Just so many little acts of kindness and goodness and mercy. And we miss this so often because in American culture, it's not about kindness and mercy. It's all about achieving and earning. But I mean, the saddest people I know are the people who say, I've earned and I've achieved and I owe myself all that. Just what a sad way to live. We're just great debtors to God, to so many people. There's so much mercy. There's so much kindness. Can we remember what God has been doing? And if we do that, we're getting a sense of God's mercy. We're seeing the backside of God. It's a beautiful thing. If we see the backside, here's the other thing about the backside of God, is if you see the backside of anybody, one of the things that you can do is you can follow that person. If you can't see their backside, you can't possibly follow them. I think this is what happens with us and God sometimes, is we think, I'm going to go out on my own, and God, are you with me? Okay, God, follow. Come on. And God, have you got my back? Love that phrase. God, have you got my back? And then we wander off somewhere, and we turn around and we say, where's God? But we're supposed to be following him, you see. So if we're right near the backside of God, then we're following. And we try to stay close. And what does this mean to follow? It's following. I'll never forget, it was 40 years ago, the first time I heard what I guess we would call a contemporary song in a worship service. I didn't have vast church experience, but all of it that I had was in a church, kind of like this one, where people wear robes, usually, and we were robes, and you sing out of hymnals, and the musical instrument in question is the organ. When they would get wild and crazy, they'd use the piano a little, And so I'll never forget, I was singing in this choir, so I'm in my robe, and I didn't know what was going to happen. This guy stands up out of the choir in his robe, and he walks down behind the lectern, and he pulled out a guitar. Like no one had seen a guitar in church. It was like there was a gasp from the crowd. It was like, it's going to be Led Zeppelin or something. I mean, it's a guitar. Oh, my goodness. And he sat down. I'll never forget it. He said he had a beautiful voice, but it wasn't the wonder of his voice. It was what was coming up out of his soul. He played this very simple song and sang it. And the words were taken from what Moses said in Exodus chapter 33. He sang, "Unto thee, O Lord, I lift up my soul. Show me thy ways, teach me thy paths, for thou art the God of my salvation." And it was so moving because it wasn't like he was performing for us. It was like he was speaking with God. He was pleading with God, show me your way. Teach me your path. That'd be like a great life mission statement for any of us. What would it be to see God's way, to follow in God's path? When Lisa and I go on vacation, I know you wonder what we do when we're on vacation. We like to go hiking when we can. We like to go up in the mountains and follow paths. And sometimes it's easy to follow the big wide paths that are super well marked, but those kind of bore me after a while. So I sort of like it where the path is a little bit difficult to follow and you got to scramble a little. And when this happens, I like to think it's kind of like trying to follow Jesus, right? Is that you're on the path, it's hard, but it's so rewarding once you do it. If you didn't exert the energy, it wouldn't be worth the effort, right? But then when you do it and you get to the top, it's great. So following Jesus is like that. And sometimes it's hard. You need a little help along the way. Sometimes there's a little marker. If you've hiked much, you know what happens. You're in the middle of woods somewhere, and there's just a little branch, and there's a little fleck of yellow paint on it. And you go, we're still on the yellow path. Just some little something that tells you you're still going the right way. Sometimes there's actually a sign that shows you a map, and it's got words. Go up there, turn right. Oh. And I mean, we need words. We have the Bible, prayer, things that help us on the way. Sometimes you need another person. We've been hiking any number of times. You just lost the path, but up ahead you see somebody. They look like they know what they're doing. You think, I'll go up where he is. We need each other. You need teachers. You need mentors. You need heroes in the faith. People that you'll say, yeah, I'll go there. Yeah. Sometimes you just get lost. Lisa and I were hiking last summer. We got a good 3 miles off the path. I mean, that's pretty lame to lose it by that much. I mean, sometimes following God, you just lose the path. You go the wrong way. You're just way the heck off track. But the amazing thing is, it's okay. You can make it back. God doesn't give you a thrashing. You got off the path. No, God's just waiting for you to come back and follow the path again. The other thing we like to do on vacation, and my children have always chided me for this, if you ask them, they'll say, our father never took us to Disney World or to any place that's fun. Instead, my dad always took us to see old rocks. That's kind of their phrase for medieval cathedrals and Roman ruins and all this stuff, which I just love. I think they love it too. They have no choice. And the thing I love about the old rocks is to think about what happened back when. I especially love, and I got to do this last week, visiting abbeys and monasteries and priories. You see these architectural wonders that you couldn't build in the year 2014 if your life depended on it. There's not enough money on planet Earth to build these fabulous buildings. But you see them, and what I like to think about when I'm in those places is not the buildings, but I think about the men and women who came to those places to live, right? Like, back in those days, if you're growing up, you had a lot of choices. You could be a fuller, or you could be a cobbler, or you could be a farmer, or you could be a mason. There were various job options that were available to you, but there were a lot of men and women in Europe and actually all around the world who decided, well, what I'm going to do with my life is I'm going to go live in a monastery or an abbey, and I'm just going to do two things with my life. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to humbly serve the poor. And when I'm in those places, I think about those men and women, and I want to honor them. I actually want to emulate them. Because when I think about however much time I have left in life, I want my life somehow to be a prayer. And I want my life somehow to be humble service with God's poor. I want to follow closer to that backside of God. And the question that we all have to ask ourselves is, you got some time on your hands in your life, and the question to ask, that's a good one to ask, is what am I doing with my time? Is there any sense in which the way I'm expending my time is in fact a following of Jesus? Am I using my time in some way to stay kind of close to Him, to go where He is going? You've got money. You got money in your pocket. However much money you have, what are you doing with your money? Am I doing anything with my money that appears that I'm following Jesus, that I'm trying to stick as close as possible to the backside of God? You've got energy. You've got talent. You've got all kinds of quirky things in you. Is any of that about following Jesus? See, Moses is so cool. He knows God so well, but he wants to know more. He wants to know God's glory, because he knows the more that he knows about God, the holier he will be, the greater the glory will be in him. I don't have any fancy closing to the sermon except to invite you to join me in what I'm planning to do the next few days, and I wish for the rest of my life, and that is just day by day, as often as I can during the day, to say what I heard that guy sing 40 years ago. Just show me thy way. Teach me thy path. So I want to find that path and I want to stay on it. Get as close to that backside of God as possible. And when that happens, there's great glory indeed.